So I am a huge sucker for games with ink, dirt, and grime. I mean, I play games like Viscera Cleanup Detail to relax. And I also really love the paint mechanics from the game Splatoon. So with such a love for messes, today's project was inevitable, which is to find order in the chaos that are messes. So first we were going to need some type of game that makes the mess. The player controls one of many of these tiny jelly squid-like creatures. They can move around with WASD and can shoot with left click. They can also dodge, which if they're already moving in a direction, will automatically dodge in that direction. However, if they are not moving, the player will just dodge in the direction of the mouse cursor, which actually begs a question, good idea or bad idea? What's your preference? Either way, dodging is important, especially in the case of this game, which is a team-based free-for-all. Essentially, the CPU opponents all have the same abilities as the player. They can move in any direction, fire their weapon, and dodge roll. And of course, these dodge rolls for both player and CPU will prevent the user from taking damage. And boy, are the CPU aggressive with their dodge rolls, which is on purpose, and you'll see why in a second. First, you may have noticed that when firing their weapon, it'll leave behind some paint splatter. This happens with every weapon, which yes, there are multiple, 4 to be exact: a pistol, an SMG, a shotgun, and a launcher. Each have their own fire rates, bullet behaviors, and ammo counts. And once the user runs out of ammo, they'll have to track down another gun somewhere in the level to replace their current weapon. And while our projectiles will hurt most competitors on contact, the launcher is a special case, in that it creates an AoE that can damage multiple competitors at one time. Now, knocking out competitors is important because while the goal of the game is to cover the most of the play area in their team color, taking out opponents puts them into a knocked out state. And while in this state, they're unable to move or attack. And so this is why the CPU are so aggressive in their combat behavior. They're purposely turned up to like an 8 out of 10 to make it more difficult to hit them, because technically, fighting is not a priority in this game. But knocking out others or being knocked out is just incredibly beneficial in the overall chaos happening, at all times. And so that is our base game, a fun little action free-for-all with a huge focus on painting the world. And it's here that we get to pull out some fun technical wizardry to figure out which team did the best job at said painting of the world. Okay, so imagine that the game world is our canvas. We keep track of all paint splatter from each projectile on this canvas. Once the game is finished, we take that canvas and then turn it into pure raw data using something called a buffer. With that raw data, we can now examine literally every pixel on the canvas and count how many times a color appears on it. And because it is pure data without any of the extra fluff, this process is fast, efficient, and accurate. Now, I've also done some other technical wizardry to speed up the process even further, but that is the basics of the way that the check works. And one day I would love to try to figure out how to extend this to a 3D space and, really test it in a similar environment to something like Splatoon. But for now, it was just cool to get this to work in 2D. But speaking of 3D, it was actually thanks to my recent 3D endeavors that I started to learn about the real potential of buffers. Now, I'm still learning of the practical implementations, but so far using it for things outside of 3D like in this project was, a really fun way to experiment and learn more about the process. I'm actually curious if I could use like a similar approach to recreating something like Viscera Cleanup Detail, but in 2D. But of course, that's for another day. But for now, what else could you think that we may be able to accomplish with this, newly learned knowledge? Be sure to share any and all thoughts in the comments. While you're at it, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like. And if you like these videos, consider joining the Patreon to help me keep making them. Finally, why not subscribe if you're new to the channel? But with that said, this has been Dev Diary, the series where I try to make my own video games. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.